The street was quiet, lined with identical two-story homes, each carefully manicured, each lawn trimmed to the exact same height, each flower bed overflowing with HOA-approved petunias. From a distance, the neighborhood looked like the perfect postcard for suburban living. But beneath that polished exterior was a system of control, a homeowners association with more power than most small governments. And at the center of this story was one house that dared to be different. For years, the homeowner had lived peacefully, paying dues, mowing the lawn, following the rules that were meant to maintain property values. But the day came when the faded beige siding began to peel, and it was time for a new coat of paint. A decision that should have been simple: refresh the home, brighten it up, give it life again, turned into the spark that ignited a war. The color chosen wasn't wild, not neon, not offensive. It was cheerful, a bold shade of sunny yellow that lit up the cul-de-sac like a beacon of warmth. To the homeowner, it symbolized happiness, energy, and freedom from the monotony of beige conformity. The first brush strokes went on, and almost instantly, heads began to turn. Curtains twitched. Neighbors slowed their cars to stare. The once uniform street suddenly had a house that stood out, a house that refused to blend in. At first, it was whispers. Quiet conversations behind closed doors. A passing comment about the brightness. A concerned look at the next board meeting. But soon, the whispers turned into formal complaints. The HOA board, a group of self-appointed enforcers led by the kind of people who live for power over others, decided to make an example. The letter was cold, clinical, and threatening. It stated that the paint color violated community standards. It demanded immediate repainting in an approved neutral shade. It warned of daily fines, escalating fees, and potential legal action if compliance wasn't met. To the homeowner, it felt like bullying. After all, nowhere in the HOA handbook did it explicitly ban yellow paint. The rules were vague, leaving aesthetic standards to the discretion of the board. And what better way for power-hungry neighbors to flex their authority than to crush someone who dared to express individuality? The letter didn't just sting, it lit a fire. The homeowner began documenting everything. Every notice, every voicemail, every little attempt to intimidate. Photos of the house were taken, showing how the paint was neat, tasteful, and perfectly professional. And while the HOA thought they were dealing with an ordinary resident who would roll over and obey, they had no idea what kind of fight they had just picked. The neighbors started to divide. Some secretly admired the bold yellow, though they wouldn't dare say it publicly. Others clutched their pearls at the property value damage they claimed was happening because one house dared to shine brighter than the rest. The HOA board grew more aggressive, showing up unannounced, measuring, taking photos, issuing fines. Every day, another notice, another fee stacked higher and higher. But instead of backing down, the homeowner smiled. There was a plan forming, one that would take this HOA obsession with conformity and turn it back on them in the most humiliating way possible. For weeks, the homeowner complied in silence, saying nothing, repainting nothing, ignoring the fines that stacked in threatening envelopes on the kitchen counter. And all the while, preparations were being made. Research into HOA bylaws, loopholes, and clauses revealed something the board had overlooked. Something that would not only protect the yellow house, but also expose the hypocrisy at the heart of the entire association. The battle lines were drawn when the HOA president, an overbearing woman known for wielding her clipboard like a weapon, arrived with yet another violation notice. She was met not with submission, but with quiet confidence. She walked away frustrated, muttering about lawsuits, but the homeowner simply watched, knowing the storm that was about to be unleashed. It wasn't just about paint anymore. It was about freedom. It was about standing up to a system designed to suffocate individuality. And soon, the entire neighborhood was going to see exactly what happens when an HOA pushes too far. The bright yellow walls glowed under the afternoon sun, a silent act of rebellion. And as the sun dipped behind the rows of beige houses, the homeowner prepared for the next move, a move that would turn this simple color dispute into the most unforgettable HOA revenge story the community had ever seen. Because if the HOA thought one bright house was a problem, they hadn't seen anything yet. The yellow house stood out like a lighthouse in a sea of conformity, and the HOA board couldn't stand it. Each week, new letters arrived, stamped in red, piling up on the kitchen counter like threats from a faceless enemy. The fines increased daily, climbing into the thousands, though none of them had any real legal weight yet. Still, the intimidation was relentless. The board president strutted around the neighborhood as if she were a sheriff in an old western, pointing to the yellow house whenever she wanted to remind others what happens when you don't follow the rules. But what the HOA didn't realize was that their obsession was being used against them. The homeowner had begun studying, not just the neighborhood bylaws, but state housing regulations, fair housing laws, and legal precedents in other HOA disputes. Hidden in the fine print was the golden ticket. The association's rules required uniformity in approved colors, but nowhere in their governing documents did they ever provide a written, specific palette. They relied on vague terms like neutral tones and community standards. Terms that meant nothing in the eyes of the law. It was a loophole big enough to drive a truck through. Armed with this discovery, the homeowner didn't just sit back. They went on the offensive. Letters were drafted, not to the HOA, but to the state's Housing Commission, to attorneys specializing in property law, even to local media outlets who loved nothing more than a story about an overreaching homeowners association. The board had no idea that while they were busy harassing one house, their actions were being documented and prepared for public exposure. Then came the first strike. One morning, while the HOA president and her loyal followers were delivering another stack of violation notices, they found a large envelope waiting for them at the clubhouse. Inside was a formal legal notice citing the exact clause in their own bylaws that rendered their demands unenforceable. Along with it were copies of the complaints filed with the State Commission and a request for a formal investigation into HOA harassment practices. Panic set in almost immediately. The board was used to intimidation, not resistance. They had never expected someone to fight back with more paperwork, more precision, and more strategy than their own. At the next meeting, the room buzzed with tension. Half the neighbors wanted the issue dropped, embarrassed that their HOA was now facing possible legal consequences. The other half doubled down, angry that their authority was being challenged. But the homeowner wasn't done. The real revenge was just beginning. On a quiet weekend morning, while the board was distracted, the homeowner hired painters again. But this time, it wasn't just about refreshing the yellow. No, this time it was about turning the entire house into a masterpiece. A carefully designed mural began to spread across the siding, tasteful, artistic, and vibrant. Flowers, trees, abstract designs that flowed like sunlight itself. It wasn't random graffiti, it was commissioned art, legally protected as personal expression under state law. When the tarps came down and the mural was revealed, the neighborhood erupted. Some neighbors gasped in shock, others whispered in awe. Children loved it. Cars slowed to a crawl just to take a look. Suddenly, what had been one bright yellow house became a neighborhood attraction. And best of all, the HOA had no written rules banning murals, no policy about art, and no grounds to demand its removal. They had written their own rules so vaguely that now they were powerless to stop it. The HOA president nearly lost her mind. She stormed up to the property, clipboard in hand, snapping photos, threatening lawsuits, screaming about property values. But every threat only dug the board deeper into the hole they had created for themselves. Because while she was ranting, the homeowner calmly uploaded photos of the mural online, telling the story of how the HOA had tried to crush creativity. The post spread quickly, shared and reshared, with thousands of comments cheering on the rebellion. What the HOA thought would be a private battle within their gated walls had now gone viral. Local news stations picked up the story. Reporters came to the neighborhood. And the cameras didn't point at the mural with disdain, they pointed at it with admiration. The story was no longer about a house painted the wrong color. It was about a homeowners association bullying a resident who dared to be different. And with the spotlight came pressure. Letters began arriving at the HOA office, not from residents, but from outsiders demanding to know why they were harassing someone for painting their home. The Housing Commission scheduled an official hearing. And suddenly, the power shifted. The HOA president, once so smug, found herself scrambling, trying to explain rules that didn't exist, trying to justify fines that had no legal basis. Board members began resigning one by one, unwilling to be dragged into the fallout. The neighborhood was splitting apart at the seams, and all of it was because of a single act of defiance, a house painted yellow. But the homeowner wasn't satisfied yet. Because while the mural was beautiful, while the legal filings were strong, there was still one final move to make. One act that would ensure the HOA never forgot this battle. An act of revenge so perfect, so devastating, that the board would regret ever sending that first letter. The mural glowed under the streetlights, a symbol of freedom and defiance. And as the board president paced in her kitchen, fuming, sleepless, desperate to regain control, the homeowner smiled. Because the final stage of the plan was already in motion. And soon, the HOA would learn exactly what it meant to underestimate the wrong neighbor. By now, the neighborhood was divided like never before. On one side stood the HOA board, clinging to their last shred of authority, desperately trying to spin the story in their favor. On the other side was the homeowner, whose yellow house had transformed into something bigger than a property dispute. It had become a symbol of rebellion against control. The mural had captured attention across town. Visitors drove through just to catch a glimpse. Photographers stopped by, snapping pictures of the vivid colors spilling across the siding. Local artists praised it. Even the city council members made comments about how art brightened communities. The HOA president could only grit her teeth as her once perfectly uniform subdivision became known as the neighborhood with the yellow mural house. But the homeowner wasn't done yet. The plan had always been in stages, and the final stage was designed not just to win, but to humiliate the HOA so thoroughly that they would never dare to target anyone again. It started quietly. Using the HOA's own rules against them, the homeowner filed a request for yard improvement. The rules stated that all applications had to be reviewed within 30 days, or else the project was automatically approved. The board, overwhelmed with the scandal and distracted by resignations, missed the deadline. And just like that, the homeowner had legal approval for their project. The next week, contractors arrived. The sound of construction filled the street. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains, wondering what was coming next. Slowly, a structure began to rise in the front yard. Not a shed, not a gazebo, but a towering installation shaped like a massive, stylized sunburst. Painted in gold and orange, it echoed the same theme as the mural: brightness, individuality, freedom. It was bold. It was unmissable. And best of all, it was 100% legal, thanks to the HOA's missed deadline. When the sunburst was unveiled, the neighborhood went silent. For a moment, even the board president was struck speechless. Then the shouting began. Threats of lawsuits. Demands for removal. But every outburst was met with one cold, hard fact: the homeowner had followed the rules. The HOA had failed to enforce their own timeline. And now the installation wasn't just allowed, it was protected. The humiliation was complete. The HOA tried everything. Emergency meetings. Desperate calls to lawyers. More violation letters that were now meaningless. But the damage was done. The local news returned, this time covering the story as a victory for homeowners everywhere. Headlines read, "Resident outsmarts HOA in brightest way possible." The story spread even further online. Comment sections filled with thousands of people celebrating the victory, mocking the HOA for their overreach, and praising the homeowner for standing up against the bullies. The pressure was too much. Within months, the HOA president resigned in disgrace, her name now attached to one of the most embarrassing HOA failures in the region. Several board members followed, unwilling to face the continued backlash. The once feared association crumbled, weakened and leaderless, struggling to maintain even basic operations. And the homeowner, they thrived. The yellow house became a landmark, a place people remembered. The mural attracted visitors every week, families taking photos in front of it, children pointing with excitement. The sunburst stood tall in the yard, glowing in the morning light, a reminder of what happens when you refuse to bow to unreasonable authority. Property values didn't fall, as the HOA had threatened. In fact, they rose. People wanted to live near a house with personality, near a neighbor who stood up against control. The supposed eyesore became the crown jewel of the community. The revenge was perfect because it wasn't loud rage or destruction, it was creativity, legality, and patience. Every move had been calculated, every step carefully planned to turn the HOA's own rules against them. What began as harassment over a paint color ended in complete victory, with the bullies exposed and powerless. And yet, the homeowner never gloated openly. There was no need. The bright yellow walls, the mural, and the golden sunburst said everything without a single word. Every time a car drove past, every time a new resident moved in, every time someone asked about the famous yellow house, the story lived on. A story of defiance. A story of freedom. A story of revenge. served in the brightest, most unforgettable way possible. The HOA had said the house color was too bright, and they hadn't seen this coming.